Russia is getting more and more desperate. With Ukrainian long-range drone strikes becoming almost a weekly event, Vladimir Putin is being forced to face the fact that Russia's air defenses are simply not working the way he claims they are. The Kremlin continues to pretend otherwise. Every time Ukraine lands a direct hit on a target deep inside Russia, officials fall back on the same tired excuse that the explosions people see are just falling drone debris, not successful strikes. But that narrative is becoming harder and harder to believe. The truth is very different. Russia is struggling. Putin is now so desperate that he is turning to an unusual solution. He is asking Turkey for help because Ukraine's campaign has badly damaged Russia's air defense capabilities. The key question is whether Turkey will respond to Putin's plea. On September 13th, Defense Express reported that Russia has started reaching out to Turkey with an offer to buy back the S-400 surface-to-air missile systems that Russia sold to Turkey several years ago. These systems are among the most advanced missile defenses Russia has ever produced, and Putin's shortage of them is now one of his major headaches as he tries to defend Russian cities and bases from Ukraine's growing arsenal of long-range drones and missiles. For Moscow, the buyback proposal makes sense. Turkey isn't actually using the S-400s it purchased, something we'll explain in a moment. And the missiles Russia delivered to Turkey will soon require Russian maintenance anyway. So Putin is trying to make a deal. Sell the S-400s back and use the cash for something more useful to Turkey. If Turkey agrees to the offer, we know exactly what Russia would be getting. Russia sold 4 of these S-400 units to Turkey back in 2017 at a total price of about $2.5 billion. That works out to roughly $625 million per unit. A very expensive purchase. What we don't know is how much Russia is offering to pay to get them back. Turkey would likely prefer a full refund, a like-for-like buyback, so that it does not lose the $2.5 billion it already spent. But Moscow could argue that because Turkey has left the weapons sitting idle, it's better to recover part of the money than let them sit unused in storage until they become obsolete. Russia's proposal is officially on the table, but the real question is simple. Will Turkey say yes? The answer is far from simple. Turkey has always walked a careful line between Russia and the West. On the one hand, it is a NATO member, and it has formally applied for membership in the European Union. That application has been stuck for years, and in May the EU voted to keep the accession process frozen, citing concerns about Turkey's democratic standards. The vote passed with 367 in favor of keeping Turkey's membership frozen, 74 against, and 188 abstentions. This shows that Turkey still wants to improve ties with the West, even if progress has stalled. On the other hand, Turkey has never completely broken ties with Russia since the Ukraine invasion began. It continues to buy more Russian oil than any EU country, for example. The fact that Turkey bought S-400s from Russia in the first place is proof that the country is not fully aligned with Western nations, many of which have taken a harder stance against Moscow. This puts Turkey in an interesting position, where there are arguments for and against agreeing to sell the S-400s back to Russia. First, the argument for selling. Turkey's purchase of the S-400s was controversial from the start. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, examined the decision in 2019, just after Turkey received its first deliveries. Buying Russian air defenses led the United States to threaten sanctions, both military and economic, because the move was viewed as a betrayal of Turkey's NATO commitments. NATO's enemy then as now was Russia, so buying Russian missile systems was seen as a serious breach of trust. The United States had even offered Turkey several Western-made systems before, including the Patriot and the French SAMP-T, but Ankara turned them down and went with the S-400 instead. Perhaps Turkey believed the Russian system was more advanced, or perhaps it saw the purchase as a way to build a closer relationship with Russia. Either way, Turkey followed through, and the U.S., under President Donald Trump, made good on its threat. Washington cut Turkey out of the F-35 fighter jet program, even though Turkey had contributed money and manufacturing support to help launch it. CSIS noted at the time that President Erdogan might have been willing to pay that price to assert what he called Turkey's national sovereignty. But this decision created a practical issue. Turkey has never actually deployed its S-400s. The reason is compatibility. As United 24 Media points out, the S-400 cannot integrate with Turkey's NATO-based air defense network, so the systems have sat idle. Selling them back could allow Turkey to recover some of its investment and perhaps convince Washington to lift some of its sanctions, including those blocking Turkey's return to the F-35 program. This sale could also allow Turkey to maintain a functional working relationship with Russia while improving its standing among NATO allies. Turkey's economic ties with Russia go beyond weapons. It buys a very large amount of Russian oil. The Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA, reports that during the first half of 2024, Turkey rose from Russia's 14th largest buyer of crude oil before the war to its third largest buyer. Other European countries cutting ties with Russian energy helped this rise, but Turkey's position means it is still sending billions of dollars into Russia's economy. CREA also notes that Turkey acts as a middleman, refining Russian oil into gasoline and diesel that ends up being sold to G7 nations. In the first half of 2024, 3 Turkish refineries processed about 1.2 billion worth of Russian crude for products shipped to G7+ countries. Politico explains that this practice is allowed because of a loophole in EU sanctions. As long as the fuel is processed in Turkey and labeled as non-Russian, it can enter the European market legally. This has generated billions for Moscow. Turkey seems determined to keep buying, even increasing purchases to 300,000 barrels per day as of June 2024, Energy Intelligence reported. This relationship gives Turkey leverage. It could use Putin's desperation to negotiate a better price for the S-400s or even demand a discount on future oil purchases in exchange for returning them. Either way, Turkey could profit while maintaining its complicated relationship with Russia. But there are strong arguments against agreeing to the sale. Selling the S-400s back to Russia would strengthen Russia militarily, exactly what NATO and the United States do not want. United 24 Media warns that such a move could create a major backlash from Washington and derail Turkey's efforts to rejoin the F-35 program and to buy new F-16 Block 70 fighters. Breaking Defense has noted that Turkey has been developing its own Steel Dome air defense system, which could integrate with NATO systems and make Turkey's reintegration into Western defense plans easier. Thus, selling the S-400s to Russia could undo that progress. It would also clash with Turkey's public stance as a supporter of Ukraine. Turkey has provided Kyiv with significant military aid, including Bayraktar drones, Cobra II vehicles, and even 2 Ada-class anti-submarine warships currently under construction. These actions have angered Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov openly criticized Turkey in November 2024, saying Turkish weapons were being used to kill Russian soldiers and civilians, even as Turkey claimed to want to act as a mediator. Turkey has also blocked military ship movements through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits, which has hurt Russia's Black Sea fleet more than anyone else. Moscow has lost about a third of its fleet and cannot send reinforcements into the Black Sea due to Turkey's blockade. This makes it clear that weakening Russia aligns with Turkey's interests. Selling the S-400s back would contradict that strategy. There is one other possible path. Instead of selling the systems back to Russia, Turkey could sell them to Ukraine. This would anger Moscow but would also earn Turkey praise in the West. Ukraine badly needs more air defense systems, and its forces are already familiar with Soviet-style technology, so they might be able to put the S-400s to use. Turkey refused this option in 2023 when the U.S. suggested it, likely out of fear of damaging its relationship with Russia. But now, if selling back to Russia would cause just as much anger in the West, Ankara might reconsider. If Turkey were bold enough, it could both rid itself of the S-400s and take a step closer to NATO by providing Ukraine with a badly needed boost in air defenses. Whether Erdogan is willing to take that risk remains to be seen. Putin may have created a problem for himself by asking for the buyback in the first place, drawing new attention to the issue. For now, all we know is that Russia is clearly growing more desperate by the day, not just because of its battlefield losses, but because of its dwindling ability to defend its own territory. Putin is even reported to have ordered military cooks to be sent to the front lines to make up for manpower shortages. The coming weeks will show whether Turkey decides to help Russia, hurt it, or strike its own balance in the middle.